The release of Assassin's Creed Unity in 2014 was a watershed moment for the franchise, and that was for all the wrong reasons. Positioned as the 7th main installment in the series, Unity arrived on the scene amidst a flurry of anticipation and expectation, promises to transport players to a new generation of AC that would, no pun intended, revolutionize the series going forward. But this supposed technical marvel, this new era of the series, resulted in a sales implosion, a reputation destroyed, and a once iconic series identity being rebooted and reworked until it no longer existed. But before we get to that, we need some context. The gaming landscape of the early 2010s was defined by a sense of transition and transformation. With the advent of the 8th generation consoles, gamers eagerly awaited the next leap into gameplay innovation, especially coming off the absolute game changers that were the Xbox 360 and PS3. Unity emerged as one of the flagship titles for these new platforms, as after 5 years of annual AC games, Ubisoft pushed forward to essentially use Unity as a launch title for the new generation. Tasked with showcasing their capabilities and pushing the boundaries of what was possible in this franchise, Ubisoft came with unabashed ambition. But this ambition didn't match the capabilities of an annual release cycle, or in the case of 2014, releasing 2 games on the same day. Against this backdrop of technological progress and anticipation, Unity's arrival was met with excitement, right up until people put the disc in their consoles. Now, first and foremost, the French Revolution represented a pretty noticeable departure from the swashbuckling nature of its predecessor, Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. While Black Flag had captivated players with its adaptation of the franchise into the context of the golden era of piracy, Unity shifted the focus back to the urban landscapes and political intrigue of post-Renaissance era Europe. After years of complaints from critics that the annual experience resulted in a dry, repetitive formula, this decision already put Unity on the back foot. The respect the game had for the series' core identity may have been a strategic move to cater to the series' most hardcore fans, like myself, but it definitely resulted in calls of the series getting lazy. Now, me personally, I'll never understand the idea of a series needing to constantly change its core elements to stay fresh, but maybe I'm just old-fashioned. Regardless of the idiots being sad they couldn't be a pirate anymore, revolutionary Paris provided the perfect canvas for Unity's ambitions. That's right, we're starting on a positive. From the grandeur of the Notre Dame Cathedral, which supposedly took a year of development time to craft, to the squalid alleyway of the city slums, Unity's Paris was a meticulously crafted world that invited players to entirely immerse themselves in 18th century France. The city pulsed with life, its streets teeming with crowds of NPCs going about their daily routines. Random events and endless side content made for an engaging open world experience, and the general attention to detail captured the immersion and authenticity the series was known for, and it took it to another level. That being said, the map looked like this, which is a very obvious problem, but we moved on. Unity's ambitious vision, though, came with its letdowns, and I suppose it's time to talk about the elephant in the room. The transition from 7th gen to 8th gen was a sizable one from a hardware point of view, but Ubisoft had perhaps overreached their desire to stand out in the new age. The attention to detail, the inclusion of countless interiors that expanded the open world, combined with the vast amount of unique NPCs, all showcased with some of the highest technical fidelity we'd ever seen to that point, made for some technical and design hurdles for the development team. Well, hurdles might be an understatement. The intricate architecture and bustling crowds of Paris required a level of detail and complexity that pushed the limits of hardware capabilities at the time. And although those issues could have somewhat been excused, what couldn't was the fact that on release, the game came out unfinished. We all know about the bugs this game saw on release. It was, without hyperbole, one of the most broken and unpolished pieces of work I've ever seen. And on that fateful day in 2014, it led to a lot of people simply giving up on what could have been the potential best AC game to date. I don't need to give a full recap of the bugs. We've seen the clips of people falling through the world. We've seen the horrifying screen grabs of faceless NPCs. You know that Unity was broken on launch, and although it's been thoroughly patched as to not be game breaking, the fundamental foundations of Unity still retain the cracks that were unfixable after the game was rushed out the door. What could have been the best AC game was never given that opportunity, purely due to Ubisoft's insistence on a constant cash flow of Assassin's Creed. But although it could never achieve that honour, it could still see itself last in the minds of fans. It could survive the media firestorm and come out the other end appreciated. And Unity did just that. Unity's portrayal of 18th century Paris stands as a pivotal aspect of the game's identity, serving as a canvas for its intricacy and level to detail. This Parisian playground truly did encapsulate the vibrant yet complex atmosphere of the era, with the dichotomy of the gorgeous Renaissance towers and the violent and distressed slums acting as such an interesting context point that recalls memories of the similarities of Acre and AC1. At its best, Unity's Parisian landscape exudes a sense of authenticity and grandeur, drawing players into a world teeming with historical resonance. Ubisoft's introduction of a more dynamic crowd system adds a layer of realism to the urban environment, imbuing it with the sense that this city is lived in. These people that you're fighting to protect are present and in need of that aid in upholding their liberty. But again, that's at its best. Too often, for all its dynamism, Unity's crowd AI can feel superficial and scripted, and when that's matched up with the dysfunctional technical aspects, it leads to uncanny and awkward encounters where they'll either just react to nothing or have no reaction at all to a brutal murder. When it works, it creates the most atmospherically immersive world we've seen in the series, but when it doesn't, it feels almost as if you can see the code holding the world together, and it's that lack of consistency that brings the holistic experience of exploring the world down. Similarly, Unity's seamless open world experience represents both a technical achievement and a source of frustration. The city of Paris is so small yet so condensed, and so you can explore the entire thing without interruption, including the interior of what feels like every building. However, this seamlessness comes at a cost, as Unity's performance issues and technical hiccups often disrupt that flow of gameplay. Playing through Unity, you will undoubtedly encounter pop-in textures, frame rate drops, and other graphical glitches as you navigate the city, again directly affecting the point of the seamless nature of the open world. Everything in Paris is built for immersion, but the small details in moment-to-moment gameplay shatter that immersion. That being said, when you're not just exploring freely, Paris is replete with side activities and collectibles that offer extra layers of gameplay and world building that expand what otherwise could have been a shallow game. The Paris stories, the murder mysteries, the Nostradamus enigmas, the Café Theatre missions, the Animus glitches, the co-op missions, the Helix assassinations. The list really feels endless, and although this abundance of content clutters up the map at times, that UI flaw is made up for the fact that, you actually have unique and engaging things to explore, unlike a certain trilogy that would follow. This abundance of unique content is bolstered even more by the game's phenomenal customization system, which bounces off the design of games like Brotherhood, Revelations and AC3 and expands your options endlessly. Instead of picking individual outfits, you can pick out the design of your boots, pants, bracers, torso and even your hood, mixing and matching styles until you have a version of Arno that you feel is truly yours. Of course, you also have the colour options, but if you don't choose Assassin White, you're insane, and that's just a fact, but at least the option's there. Now, I know people are sick and tired of seeing retrospectives that are just recaps of a game's story, but I wouldn't be doing the game justice if I didn't at least remind you of the story this game tells, because if I just analyse it without the context, it will make no fucking sense. Assassin's Creed Unity follows the journey of Arno Dorian, a young Frenchman whose life is forever changed when his adoptive father, Francois de la Serre, Grandmaster of the Parisian Rite of the Templar Order, is murdered. Oh yeah, and also he and his adopted sister are like sneaky links. It's a bit odd, but Ubisoft are a French company, so they're going to be sexual deviants either way.
You seem to have caused quite a commotion.
Well, what can I say? You were always a bad influence.
Oh, you were a worse one.
Now, one of the better and more misunderstood aspects of Unity's story comes first with the idea that Arno is simply an Ezio clone. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying comparisons aren't reasonable. No one's made more comparisons between Assassin's Creed games than me. However, this comparison is misplaced, and that's because it's so surface level. Essentially, people call Arno an Ezio clone because he's charismatic. He's presented as attractive to women, even if it is his stepsister. Oh yeah, and he's got a ponytail. At the start of the game, we see Arno represented as a charismatic troublemaker, stealing his watch back after losing it in a poker game. Sure, somewhat similar to Ezio. Then, he inadvertently causes the death of a father figure after failing to deliver a letter on time. Again, these parallels are undoubtedly there, and they're definitely there for people to pick up on. But after that point, these two characters go on such wildly different journeys, it's almost incomprehensible how the two could be compared. While Ezio, initially doubtful of the creed, joins it due to a genuine attraction to its virtues and to do right by his family name, Arno joins it because, in essence, he has no other choice. The assassins are to Arno a refuge from the world, after he's rejected by Elise and left a drunken soul on the streets of Paris. Arno isn't committed solely to the liberation of the people. I mean, he's not against the idea, he does believe in the creed, but that belief is by no means the driving force behind his actions. It's showcased time and time again that Arno's main commitment is to his love of Elise, an idea that Ezio shunned almost immediately after joining up with his uncle to pursue the Templars. While one is willingly running into the fight, into the secret war this series tells, the other is running away from his failures, his defeats, and his losses. The Ezio trilogy is a hero's journey. Arno's story, though, is a tragedy, a tale of a fatherless boy unable to reconcile his past, taking on a strict set of ideals out of his own selfish desire to become a quote-unquote better man. We see him lose his charm, his idealism, his suave nature, replaced with a solemn but more honest perspective on the world. Whilst Ezio eventually gains this perspective, his characterization is always one of a charismatic leader, a traditional hero. If Ezio is the Peter Pan of the series, Arno is one of the Lost Boys, chasing his lost love and a hollow revenge to avoid the responsibility of embodying what the creed truly entails. Arno is not an Ezio clone, he's the blueprint of one, burned up in a fire of guilt and loss, and rebuilt into a misshapen, half-stable replica, and that makes him one of potentially the most interesting characters in the franchise. It's just a shame the plot is such a mess. The story really begins in 1789, with Arno witnessing the murder of Francois orchestrated to collapse a truce between the assassins and Templars. Blamed for the crime, Arno is imprisoned, but he escapes with the help of a fellow prisoner, an assassin named Pierre Bellec. He chooses to join the Brotherhood, doing away with what would have been an exuberant and luxurious life to fight from the shadows, and for really the first time in the series, we see a progression from recruit to assassin. Of course, AC1 had its inclusion of the ranks of the Brotherhood, but Altair had already achieved its highest prestige prior to the game starting. Ezio was trained throughout the course of AC2, but it wasn't within the context of a stable Brotherhood. Connor kind of saw this progression, as he was made to earn his robes by showcasing his ability, and Edward was a pirate. Arno, however, is shown to have to work his way up to be trusted to take on the task of killing a Templar, which is treated like a genuinely important event in Unity. It's shown that the majority of assassins are tasked with recon and minor missions, while the elimination of the Templars are the jobs of those who've proven themselves. But Arno is able to fast-track this process with the support of Bellec, after he and his mentor run across Sever, one of the men responsible for the murder of Delacer. Although his motives are clearly ulterior to that of the assassins, Bellec can't go against the willingness for Arno to kill Templars, and so, in the confines of the Notre Dame Cathedral, Arno takes his first blood. Instead of White Room confessions, Unity gave Arno this weird superpower to see the memories of the people he kills. Don't ask me why, and certainly don't ask Ubisoft why, because there's no clear canonical reason for this, and it makes no sense whatsoever. But anyway, this allows Arno to slowly uncover the grand conspiracy that led to the death of Delacer, allowing for him to subsequently assassinate the King of Beggars, with the help of notorious deviant the Marquis de Sade. It's made clear here that the assassins really need to ally with the lowest of the low to achieve their goals. But to be fair, the Marquis de Sade was probably an idol for the people that ran Ubisoft in 2014. The Marquis reveals that he uncovered the pin that killed Delacer, which led Arno to meeting the blacksmith Francois Thomas Germain, who fucking has heterochromia, so we know he's the sage, but anyway. Germain leads Arno to the supposed new leader of the order, Lafreniere, who Arno kills without the grace of the Brotherhood. This again is where we see the Assassin Brotherhood be fleshed out in a setting where they're fully stable, as the Assassin Council berate Arno for an assassination without blessing. Rightfully so, as it's revealed that Lafreniere was in fact not the leader of the Templars. Arno was at least allowed to continue his investigation though, which led him to a reacquaintance with Elise, who he rescues from a Templar ambush and brings back to the assassin hideout. What a horny, ancestral idiot. With Elise now in the protection of the assassins, we come to the most egregious piece of story mismanagement the series has ever seen. In a shock reveal, the leader of the council, Mirabeau, is murdered, and of course, because Arno's got a raging hard-on, he refuses to believe Elise could be responsible. and this is where the story truly falls apart. See, the main story of Unity is honestly a by-the-numbers murder mystery revenge, with its themes of fanaticism and the dangers of dogma being aggressively shallow, at least throughout this main plot thread. The place where these themes actually come into play is in the betrayal of Bellec, as it's revealed that he was responsible for the murder of Mirabeau.
Took you long enough, piss pot.
Bellec?
Should've known it'd be you that find me. Only question is, what happens now?
You poisoned Mirabeau!
He poisoned us! Peace with the Templars is a fairy tale.
And you're the only one who can save the Brotherhood?
You think it's the first time this has happened? The first time that the Assassins have been forced to purge their leadership? The first time that the Order has built itself back up from nothing to power? No. Masyaf, Monteregione, the American colonies. It's all happened before. And we have risen anew, stronger than ever. But now, we've lost our purpose, Arno. We mired ourselves in politics and revolutions, but we're not a nation. We're an army. And in an army, making peace with the enemy is called treason. No, I'm not the only one that can save the Brotherhood. We can. Together.
Bellec. You know I can't do that.
That's a pity.
Now, this could have been phenomenal, because to be honest, Bellec stands as easily the most intriguing character in the game. Starting out as Arno's mentor and sort of secondary adopted father, Bellec stands out as a staunch loyalist of the Creed, refusing ideas of peace and unity between the Templars and Assassins. His dogmatic approach to the Brotherhood acts as a direct mirror to the approach of these Templars that killed De La Serre, and his actions follow suit, as he murders the assassin mentor and eventually faces Arno down in a moral and physical duel, culminating under the warm glow of a candlelit cathedral. The only problem is that for some godforsaken reason, this climactic and poignant moment happens halfway through the game. Instead of building this genuinely interesting twist throughout the course of the narrative, the betrayal is rushed in at the midpoint as to allow for the classic AC formula of the Templar hunt to continue. It's here where I can somewhat understand people's critique of Unity being similar to that which we'd seen before, because this twist really stands as the only narrative point that truly steps out the box of the series and presents a new and unique aspect of the Creed and its philosophy. Sure, Al-Mualim betrayed Altair, but that was because of his own lust for power and control. Bellec, on the other hand, is driven by a single-minded loyalty to a creed that we as an audience already understand is flawed by the surrounding elements of the narrative. Literally all Unity had to do was put this plot point at the end to then make the narrative feel compelling and satisfying. But no, instead we have to get the classic Templar hunt. Oh yeah, by the way, I do still have a face, in case you were wondering. I just thought I'd wait until halfway through the video to actually show you, just to see who the real ones are. So comment down below the word Scarab if you've gotten to this point, so I know who to look out for. From here, Arno's essentially demoted to fetch quests, starting with the infiltration of the King's Palace to destroy correspondence between the King and Mirabeau before the revolutionaries get a hold of it, which again is a fascinating opportunity to critique the Brotherhood that is simply washed over by a Napoleon Bonaparte cameo. And speaking of thematic intrigue being brushed over, from here we get a confusing set of assassinations, as Arno uncovers a plot to starve the citizens of France after killing the French captain Frederic Rouy, leading him with a returning Elise to assassinate Marie Levesque before fucking each other in a hot air balloon, for reasons. The two also uncover a plan to execute King Louis, and again, the sheer idea that the assassins in this world are working against the French Revolution, working in active support of a brutal monarchic regime, is such a fascinating idea. The reverse polarity of the assassins being pro-monarch and the Templars being pro-revolution is such an interesting concept that could have been focused on throughout the game, bouncing off of AC Rogue's themes perfectly and calling back to games like Assassin's Creed 3. But instead, the Templars jump from pro to anti-revolution every 5 minutes, and the Assassin's allegiance to a feudal system is never really criticised until the final moments of the game, and even then it's done so through lazy metaphor. It creates this continual thematic dissonance that leaves the player not only underwhelmed by the game's messaging, but legitimately confused about the plot itself. Who is Arno fighting for? Who are the assassins fighting for? What do the Templars hope to achieve aside from the Sword of Eden? How does the Revolution factor into the Secret War? All of these questions are answered, but they're answered multiple different times, and in multiple different ways, and it makes following this overarching narrative feel like exploring a hedge maze. Anyway, Arno arrives at the execution of King Louis to find Germain, which triggers Elise to get revenge for her father, only for the two to miss their chance, and after Arno returns to the council, he's greeted with the revelation that due to his obsession with the revenge and his defiance of orders, he would be excommunicated from the order. I know I'm repeating myself here, but this contradiction of the Brotherhood that claims to fight for freedom excommunicating their members for not towing the order's line is such a beautiful critique of the creed that's undone within about 3 hours when Arno simply rejoins the Brotherhood. This return comes after Elise rescues Arno from a pit of despair in Versailles, bringing him back to Paris to prevent Germain from uncovering the Sword of Eden, which, by the way, comes just after the assassination of Latouche, which is the single best black box mission in the entire game. But that's just a side note. Elise and Arno finally face off against Germain, and in one of the least thought-provoking boss battles of all time, they defeat him. As in one final showdown, Elise is tragically cut down, and Arno's revenge is made that much more sweet.
Oh no!
I'm stuck!
He's getting away!
Wait, I'm almost free.
I can take him.
No, you can't. Not alone. Wait for me!
I'm sorry.
Elise! 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 Elise, no.
With that, we cut to the modern day, and oh Jesus Christ, I've still not even spoken about the modern day yet. Do I have to? See, after AC3, the prevention of the end of the world, Desmond's death, and the release of Juno, the AC modern day went in directions. Directions that made so little sense that Unity, for all intents and purposes, scrapped the overarching modern day plot and introduced us instead to this absolute babe.
Hey there. This is probably disorienting, so I'll be brief. I'm Bishop, not my real name obviously, but that's as much as you'll get today.
In Unity, you play as a voiceless, faceless initiate in a series of cutscenes, where it's revealed to you that the assassins are looking to find the bodies of sages before the Templars can to unlock their DNA. And to be honest, if you don't know what sages are at this point, I don't know how you're still watching this video. However, after our final showdown, we jump to years later to find Arno once again an assassin, but for some reason working with a dictatorial emperor, burying the body of Germain in the catacombs of Paris. And we find out that all of our work, the entire game, the last 20 hours, have amounted to nothing. The body is lost, the modern day plot has no continuation. If you want to be straightforward about it, Unity is reduced to a side game, and its confusing, messy, contradictory plot does nothing for the series except lower the aggregate quality of the franchise's narrative that had been almost perfect for 7 years. And in its final moments, it rubs all of its thematic contradictions in our face, with a final speech from Arno that, if said by Altair, might have been somewhat comprehensible, but in the context of what we've just witnessed, is the single laziest legacy speech of any character in the series.
The creed of the Assassin Brotherhood teaches us that nothing is forbidden to us. Once, I thought that meant we were free to do as we would, to pursue our ideals no matter the cost. I understand now. Not a grant of permission, the creed is a warning. Ideals too easily give way to dogma. Dogma becomes fanaticism. No higher power sits in judgment of us. No supreme being watches to punish us for our sins. In the end, only we ourselves can guard against our obsessions. Only we can decide whether the road we walk carries too high a toll. We believe ourselves redeemers, avengers, saviors. We make war on those who oppose us, and they in turn make war on us. We dream of leaving our stamp upon the world. Even as we give our lives in a conflict that will be recorded in no history book. All that we do, all that we are, begins and ends with ourselves.
Wow, I never realised quite how messy the story of Assassin's Creed Unity is until now. Jesus. But hold on, the video's not over. We still have more to talk about. We even have positive things to talk about. So strap in. The story of Unity leaves much to be desired, with loose ends left untied and questions left unanswered, leaving players feeling unfulfilled. Everything we did to reach that ending was for nothing in the context of the overarching story, and the internal story was underwhelming at best. It's a mixed bag of ambitious ideas and missed opportunities, and although it at least presents meaningful and layered concepts, it fails to execute on the vast majority of them. At times, the story actually feels like a tacked on addition to what Unity really existed to serve, a showcase of new technology. Unity didn't promise to revolutionize the gameplay of this franchise. It didn't make claims of some new fresh perspective, but instead it looked to achieve perfection in the gameplay elements already core to the franchise. Its execution in this regard, like so many things in this game, could have been perfect, but it didn't quite get there. One of the most hyped features of Unity, which we actually hadn't seen before, was the introduction of cooperative multiplayer, allowing players to team up with friends for shared missions and heists. And while this concept had the potential to breathe new life into the franchise, its implementation was of course marred by the technical issues and lackluster execution. Connection problems, framerate drops, synchronization issues, they plagued the cooperative experience, and it made it more frustrating than fun most of the time. Although the co-op missions themselves were interesting little tidbits of the French Revolution that expanded the world building and provided some legitimately fresh mission design, if you can't actually connect to a co-op server, what's the point? It's a real shame though, because this was such a big moment for the franchise, and if Ubisoft had just had the patience to build this foundational mechanic into a functional and better developed aspect of the games, we could have seen incredible co-op come out. But of course, instead, we got Odyssey. Unity also sought to overhaul the franchise's combat system, which by this point had descended from the grounded and defensive system originally intended into a button-mashy Arkham free-flow ripoff. Placing a greater emphasis on skill, strategy and defense, Unity recaptured the feeling of combat that the series presented in its very first trailer. One-on-one, an assassin is unbeatable, ruthless, but when surrounded, the best option is to disappear back into the crowd. The game did away with an animation-based approach to combat, returning to a hitbox system which is almost always far more engaging, more difficult, and by extension, more fun to master. To be fair, The combat in Unity did have its unresponsive moments and basic functionalities that didn't translate, such as the inability to dodge roll while not in active combat, but considering it was the first game in 5 years to have a legitimate skill gap, I can forgive it for an occasionally clunky moment. That being said, a lot of this legitimate difficulty could be completely glossed over with the simple decision to buy a overpowered piece of equipment, using perhaps the second most controversial aspect of Unity, the Helix store. Although AC had seen DLC and microtransactions in games prior, Unity was the turning point for the series where the gameplay began to see elements built directly to funnel players to buying time savers using their real hard-earned money. The predatory monetization practices of Ubisoft have been well documented by now, as post-Unity they became core to the experience of every single game the company released, and although they're not unavoidable in Unity, it was the catalyst for business practices that would directly impact on the series going forward. By offering players the option to bypass the game's progression system with real money, Unity undermined the sense of achievement and satisfaction that comes from earning rewards through gameplay, and this led to eventually the games doing away with gameplay-based rewards entirely. However, we're not at the most important part yet, because the core of Unity's gameplay experience is the stealth system, which is a masterful blend of strategic planning, player agency, and seamless integration with the game environment. Unlike its predecessors, which often relied on scripted events or rigid mission structures, Unity empowers players with unparalleled freedom to approach objectives with creativity and finesse through use of the infamous black box system. Not seen to this extent since AC1, these black box missions recapture what it is to embody the assassin fantasy, which you can fully understand by checking out my AC Mirage review that I dropped a few months ago. One of the standout features of the stealth system is its emphasis on player choice, made phenomenal by the excess of tools and weapons Unity allows. Whether it's distracting guards with cherry bombs, stunning them only to disappear back into the crowd, using the berserk blade to draw out enemies, or simply sneaking around the cover points to use your hidden blade, you truly can approach almost every black box mission in whatever way you please. This level of freedom not only enhances the game's replay value tenfold, which is massively important when it comes to AC, but it also fosters the sense of ownership over your actions, as each decision carries real-world consequences within the game world. In addition to its core gameplay mechanics, the stealth system in Unity is further enhanced by its robust customization options and progression system that I mentioned earlier. Players have the ability to tailor their assassin's abilities and equipment to suit their playstyle. So if you want extra cover in crowds, you can equip specific robes, and if you want to stay at range from your target, you can just buy a rifle. Considering it was the very first implementation of this almost entirely revamped system, it is executed near to perfection, and it's led to the lifespan of Unity being far longer than it should have, with people still to this day uploading videos showcasing new ways to tackle these missions. If any part of Unity stands out as ambition achieved, it's the stealth. It stands as the shining example of innovation and excellence in game design that the rest of the game tried to be, mastering both the assassin's freedom of choice and the player's sense of immersion. Like I've said 100 times in this video, Unity was ambitious, but it was this mechanic that made that ambition worth it. And now, what you've all been waiting for. Let's talk about parkour. Unity introduced a revamped parkour system that aimed to provide players with a more fluid and immersive traversal experience throughout the streets of revolutionary Paris. The system did away with the single button run forward auto jump of AC3, 4 and Rogue, and returned to a more thoughtful mechanic that required precise inputs and a thoughtful approach. Finally back in a densely built city, Unity utilised its third dimension to its advantage, and designed the parkour around 3 paths: parkour down, parkour straight, and parkour up. For the first time, the player had control not only over which direction they went, but which plane they did it for, and this additional layer took a while for players to adjust to. Some simply tried to play Unity like old games, running straight forward and slowly climbing to the top of buildings. But others spent time working on figuring out the intricacies of the system, planning parkour routes akin to how parkour athletes do in real life, and eventually developing their skills until they could pull off runs that weren't just technically impressive, but visually gorgeous. Of course, it still struggled with the general input lag and buggy nature of the base game that plagued the entire game, and for some that ruined all chance of Unity's parkour being considered some of the best in the franchise. Others saw it as style over substance, with flippy animations not being able to make up for the lack of a simple side eject. But what a lot of people miss when playing Unity is that it's built with context in mind. Sure, in past games you could side eject whenever you wanted, but in Unity, that move was still possible. It just required more precise inputs and more patience. Essentially, to side eject, you need to be attached to the side of a building in the midst of climbing using parkour up before releasing the parkour up button, still holding the trigger and moving the stick to whichever side you want. To be fair, the lack of tutorial of these precise inputs, or at times false tutorials, turned a lot of people away from trying to experiment and master the system. A prime example of this is the grab back, a mechanic in every AC game, which the game presents as a simple tap of B or circle, but in reality it requires the player to spam those buttons when in freefall. The same thing applies to the recovery roll, and because these mechanics aren't properly presented, it means that the vast majority of players will simply not encounter them. The parkour system was also joined perfectly with the world design, with each rooftop and alleyway meticulously designed to facilitate fluid and intuitive movement that was not only satisfying in a gameplay setting, but was also accurate to real life parkour routes. Unity sought to actually mirror the experience of real-world parkour, and this homage to the real art drew away from the traditional platforming mechanics that the original AC1 system was built from. The only thing that Unity truly lacks in the parkour department is the responsiveness of prior games. In AC1's Revelations, if you press an input, Altair and Ezio will do what you tell them to do instantly, but Unity does have that lack of responsiveness that can occasionally ruin a parkour run. Other than that though, it retains every single aspect that prior games had, while adding dimensionality, authenticity and style to what otherwise was just a 3D platformer with fancy animations. Of course, like everything Unity did, Syndicate took the parkour and took it 3 steps back, but the effect of future games doesn't affect the fact that Unity's new foundation of the system was well thought out and well implemented, and with just a few changes in terms of functionality, it could have become the definitive parkour system not just in the series, but in the industry as a whole. Looking back to 2014, Unity really did ignite a storm of both hope and letdown. Positioned as the flagship for Ubisoft's entry into the next generation of consoles, its initial reception drew so much away from what this game actually was. And rightfully so. Any game this broken on release, without a groundbreaking story or mind-bending gameplay to make up for it, doesn't deserve widespread praise. It's precisely because Unity stayed so loyal to the core identities of the franchise that it wasn't given any leeway for its technical mishaps. If it had come out as some new, fresh reboot of the series, I have no doubt people would have looked past the glitches to admire the ambition of the project, but because people saw it as just another AC, it didn't get that pass, which is a real tragedy, because underneath the technical issues and the admittedly by-the-numbers narrative, it could have been, for all intents and purposes, the perfect Assassin's Creed game. A game that captures the assassin fantasy, that explores the quandaries of the Assassin-Templar conflict, a game that allows you to leap across rooftops, blend into the world around you, and explore history authentically and immersively. And despite its rocky launch and its inability to live up to that potential, Unity has left an indelible mark on the franchise. It's looked at today as the last game, besides perhaps Mirage, to truly encapsulate these unique elements that made Assassin's Creed, Assassin's Creed. Its technical achievements and ambitious narrative scope could have pushed the boundaries of what was possible in the franchise, but instead all the great it did was thrown away in future entries, replaced by underdeveloped but easily profitable RPG mechanics and mythological flashing lights. Unity's legacy serves as a cautionary tale for developers and publishers alike, highlighting the dangers of prioritizing short-term profits over long-term player satisfaction and loyalty. It acts as a pariah of why rushing out titles simply doesn't work. It underscores the importance of cultivating player trust and goodwill, and it stands as one of the greatest examples the industry has of wasted potential. But thankfully, in its current state, long-term fans and new fans alike can revisit Unity and experience what it once meant to play a true Assassin's Creed game. And that I would recommend to everyone, because it's an experience that truly cannot be replicated by anything else. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy, I would really appreciate it if you could hit like, and if you're new here, make sure to subscribe with post notifications turned on. Thanks again for watching, I really do appreciate it, and with that being said, I've been Joe, aka Found a Scarab, and I'll see you in the next one. I've not recorded a video in so long. It's so nice to record videos again.